Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm Reverend Matt and I'm the Connectionalist, and today we're going to react to another Redeem Zoomer video on a topic that I have been exploring myself recently, and it's this idea of, is beauty objective, right? Meaning, is beauty in the eye of the beholder, or is beauty kind of this objective thing that, like, is there a universal sense of beauty across cultures and people and time and all that kind of stuff? And that's kind of an interesting thing I've been thinking about a lot about recently. And I'm starting to lean more on the side of that I do believe that there is some amount of objective beauty, right? Like there's very few people that would look at like the Grand Canyon and be like, that's not incredible. That's not beautiful, right? And so the video today that Redeem Zoomer has is called How Churches Became Ugly and Why That's a Problem. And I used to, when I was a teenager, I was like really, really very much in the like, we don't need to be spending money on churches, like it doesn't matter and all this kind of stuff. But I've really kind of changed my mind on that over the last, oh Lord, I was 15 years ago. I ceased being a teenager 15 years ago. That's very scary. Almost 15 years ago. I wish I didn't have that thought. So yeah, I've changed a lot on that over the last 10 to 15 years. And so I kind of want to explore this topic today in Redeem Zoomer's video, and we'll see where we get. Make sure you go like and subscribe to him. He does a lot of really, really good content. So let's go ahead and jump right on in.
I'm going on a trip to Paris to see Notre Dame Cathedral. Cool, I'm going on a trip to Dallas to see Watermark Community Church.
Yeah.
The reason a conversation like this has never happened ever is because traditional churches were built with beauty in mind, whereas modern churches are more built with economics in mind.
Yeah, that's very true. And this is kind of, I pastor in a church that was built in the 1930s, and it is beautiful. And that's kind of what's made me really change my mind on this, is that if you can do it for a good amount of money, that's not ridiculous, you should make a beautiful church rather than a pragmatic church, because they stand the test of time and the building itself inspires people towards faith, and that's worth something monetarily. And so, yeah.
And it's not just tourist attraction medieval cathedrals in Europe that used to be beautiful. In practically every American town, you can find a beautiful old church of each mainline Protestant denomination.
Yeah.
These churches still exist, but it's mostly old people who go there. Young people tend to go to more modern churches that are less than 30 years old. So how did this happen, and is this even a problem? It's
born in Oklahoma.
Important to understand that these aren't just different styles of architecture, but completely different understandings of Christianity itself.
Yeah.
Traditional churches, like Catholic, Protestant, and Orthodox, despite their differences, are closer to each other than they are to modern non-denominational and similar churches. So the different architecture styles are just the fruit of different underlying beliefs about what the church even is. Evangelicals tend to say that the church isn't a building, it's a people. That the church is just the group of all people who believe in Jesus, and so an individual congregation is just a fellowship of individual believers.
Yeah, this gets into that debate between the invisible church and the visible church, right? Like, did Jesus found an invisible institution, meaning kind of this ethereal idea of the church globally, or did Jesus found an institution? And I'm kind of more on the side that Jesus actually did both. Jesus founded this kind of invisible church idea, but that joins us all together, all those who call upon the name of Christ, and he founded an institution. He gave St. Peter the power to direct that institution in the beginning. The problem is that I don't take that argument so far to say Peter had to have a successor, and if you're not in the same visible institution as the successor of Peter, then you're out of communion with the one true church. That is a ridiculous thing, because so many of the popes throughout history were just evil and terrible people, and that does not constitute the idea that like you have to be a part of this institution that has an unbroken line of popes all the way back to St. Peter. I think it's more of, are you a part of a visible institution that can trace its roots back to that initial visible institution, which is basically most Christians.
When you're hanging out with your friends, you don't care if it's at your house, at a park, or at a beautiful castle. What matters is who you're hanging out with.
I mean, I don't know about that. I mean, I love my friends, but like if we're at, hanging out at, I don't know, I'm not a big fan of concerts. So if my friends are like, because they're loud, And if my friends were like, "Oh, let's go to a concert," I'd be like, "I don't really know if I want to go there." So I think the place does kind of matter, but I get his point that the people matter the most.
The same applies to the church. It's fine if it looks like this, but it's just as fine if it looks like this. Sure, it's got to be clean, have enough seats, have enough rooms for what the church wants to do, but all the concerns about the building are purely pragmatic. But there's more. Some of it is just a lack of concern for church architecture, but sometimes evangelical churches actively try to not look traditional.
Yeah, that's more of my problem. I don't really have a problem with pragmatic churches where it's like, oh, we just don't have the money, we got to build something pragmatic. That's not my issue. It's when you actively try to reject the beauty that is found in traditional architecture. I think that is just a weird choice because what you're basically saying is like a church shouldn't be beautiful, and even though you can afford it to look beautiful, which I think is just a weird thing to do.
Non-denominational churches weren't popular until very recently, and when they were starting out, they actually sold themselves as not being
Right.
traditional churches. They tried to paint traditional Protestant denominations as old, dry, stale, and judgmental, and paint themselves as hip, cool, fun, and exciting.
This is the era I grew up in. My parents did not grow up in this era, and most people watching this, your parents might have. A lot of you who are watching are very young, but I grew up in this era as a millennial of like the denominational church is dead, traditional worship is dead, and it's going to be dead forever, and modern worship's the new way, and this is just the natural evolution of the church, and all this stuff, right? Like, and that's how I grew up. It's like the hip, new, cool, fun way of doing church. But what we've actually really found now that we're about 25 years removed, 30 years removed from the beginning of that movement is that the fruit has not been there, right? A lot of these churches have grown, right? And that's a good thing. There's fruit in that. A lot of these churches have converted people, right? And baptized people. There's fruit in that. But I don't think it's like, I don't think it's been a smashing success of a project, right? Like, I don't think we can look back on the last 30 years and be like, yes, that fixed the church, the guitars and the lights and the modern worship, which if that's what you like, I actually really don't have a problem with that as long as the sacraments are being administered and some of the traditional aspects of the church are being done. I don't really have a problem with that. But let's not treat it like that's what was going to fix the church and that all the ones that do traditional stuff are stale and old and going to die, because that's just not the case. We know that now.
They did a pretty good job sucking the young people out of traditional churches.
Yes, that's also my main critique is that a lot of these like new wave churches did not build a majority of their membership off of new Christians. They built the vast majority of it off of sucking Christians away from other more established churches. And that's probably not a net positive for the kingdom of God. And that is kind of my chief issue is that it was really just like, oh, yes, oh, we have 2,000 people in our church and 100 of them, which is great, 100 of them are converts, but 1,900 of them, we just took 50 from every church in our area, every church that had 200 people in worship, we took 50 from all of them. And now all those churches struggle, but our big megachurch doesn't. And I think that, like, I don't think that's good for the kingdom of God, and I'm not really sure I have a solution for that. But I think we really have to do a better job when people try to come into our church of asking them why they're coming to our church. As a minister, I've had people try to come to my church because they're mad at their previous pastor. I'm not taking them. I'm not taking them unless it's a very good reason, and if they've talked. So if they tell me and it's like a very good, like valid reason, I'll take them. But if they're like, "No, I'm just mad at them because maybe they didn't do what I wanted to do," or whatever it is, I'm like, one, no, because you're just going to do that same thing here. Two, you need to be talking to your minister and you need to reconcile to your minister. You're not going to just come to this church because you're mad at your other pastor. That's what pastors need to be doing for other pastors. We need to be holding people accountable to actually solving their problems with the church in a good way. Now I've had people come and be like, "I'm mad at my pastor," and I ask them like, "Oh, that is awful." Yes, you can come and be here, because the God honest truth is like, of course everyone is welcome in church, but it's my job as the minister when people are coming into membership, which is like a different level of accountability within the church. It's my job to vet that and really ask questions about where they're at and those kinds of things. Like, I don't just baptize people's children, right? If people come to me and they want their child baptized, but they have no sense that they want to be involved in the church, I'm not doing that, because those parents cannot take the vows on behalf of that child. They can't. They're not able to. And so it's my job to say, hey, I want you to pray about these questions. think about these questions, right? And come back to me. And a lot of times that goes really great, and it's really good for a family to engage that. But pastors are not the dispenser of religious goods and services. And I know I'm a little off topic here, but I say this to point out that this is what has happened, is that a lot of these like new wave churches that are like more consumer driven, I'm just going to say it, they're more consumer driven, where it's like, I've had people literally be like, I went and joined this other church because it offered more things. And that's a weird reason to join a church, right? You have to have the posture, for the young men and women watching this, you have to have the posture when you go into a church of being a servant, not being served. Now, you want to be spiritually fed by your church, but you may go to a church that's got 40 people in it and like 2 kids, okay? 2 or 3 kids, which actually in a church worshiping 40 people, 3 to 5 kids is a normal, pretty healthy amount of kids, because you always want to be running about 10 to 20% of your congregation is kids and youth, right? People under the age of 18. That's like a generally pretty healthy place to be. And there may be 3 to 5 kids. There's not going to be a robust children's church, kids church, massive VBS thing going on, but you can go into that church and make an impact and say, I'm here to serve, maybe start one of those ministries, maybe help start a kids program in a church, instead of just saying, where can I go that's going to serve me, right? That's the wrong posture. And that's what's happened in a lot of these churches. It's where can I go that best serves me as a Christian and my spiritual needs? And I don't think that's the proper posture to enter into a church for a Christian who's been a Christian for a long time. I don't think that that's a good posture. And that's what's happened, is these consumeristic driven churches have just, all the churches that were not consumer driven just got all their people sucked away over the course of 40 years. And I'm not really sure what to do about it. It's a really difficult problem, because I do want people going to church, and I don't want people to leave their church they're in now. But I just think we need to be aware of this as ministers, like especially in these larger churches, is like when people want to join your church, ask why, right? And if they're like, I just like it better here in my old church, I just don't like it. Maybe ask them like, hey, have you thought about like talking to your pastor and trying to improve that church in that neighborhood or that community that you're in, instead of driving 40 minutes to this church, right? Like, we have to do better for God's kingdom, not just to build our own little kingdoms, but we have to do what's right for God's kingdom.
So some churches and traditional denominations tried to copy their style.
Yeah, we've done this in Methodism. We're like, Life Church did a bunch of multi-site churches. We're going to do it, and it's going to work for us. And it doesn't. And the reason that it doesn't is because we're trying to play New York Yankee baseball, and we're the Oakland A's. We can't play New York Yankee baseball. Life Church is going to do that model way better than we're going to do it. So instead of trying to pretend to be them, we should do what we do really well. And there's a lot of things that Methodists do well. And so we need to live into our identity, because there's a lot of people who need that. But we chase the trends all the time, and it's just not worked, and we've lost a lot of time and money to it.
What this means is that this kind of church is getting more and more common.
Right.
Here's why this is a big problem according to traditional Christianity. According to traditional Christianity, the church is more than just the fellowship of individual believers. It includes that, but it includes much more than that. They see the church as the presence of God's kingdom here on earth.
Right, which is why I said, if the church is really the presence of God's kingdom here on earth, then we're all in it together. We're not here to build our own kingdom, right? And so when I have people coming to the church and they don't have a church home, or they're kind of non-religious, which happens a lot, I accept them into membership immediately if the conversation goes well. But if it's like, no, we're leaving our church because we don't like our old church anymore, I'm going to have some questions because I try to have a kingdom mindset.
So the church includes all the things invented by Christianity, such as modern hospitals, universities, great art and music, and yes, beautiful church buildings.
Yeah, this is really important, is the church is more than just building up this like church campus where it's like we got 18 buildings and 4,000 ministries. It's about engaging the world, and this is what the church has lost in the last 50 years. Like the mainline Protestants used to build hospitals, like you said, universities, and really try to improve the world around them, and we got to get back to that. We really got to get back to engaging the world better than we have.
Evangelicalism mainly tries to spread Christianity by telling people about Jesus, but traditionally people spread Christianity also by showing what Jesus' kingdom is like, with heavenly worship, improving society, and service to the poor.
Yes. I disagree with RZ on so much, and we are in total agreement on this, is that we have got to actually show people like what we believe. We have to say, hey, we believe in Christ. We worship the one triune Godhead, and we worship Jesus Christ, the Son of the living God. And we're going to show you that by building an awesome clinic in this part of town where there's no healthcare access, right? We've been talking about, I'm in Tulsa. We've kicked around a lot in the Methodist Church about what it would look like to open a grocery store. There's a big food desert in our city, and we've talked about like what would it look like to open like a co-op grocery store where the local employees actually own the store and we like help invest in it. It's not like a plan that's like about to happen, but it's something we've talked about a lot because we think we have to get back to doing stuff like that.
Traditional Christianity is not just about going to heaven, but the
Right.
reality that heaven is colonizing earth through the church, and therefore the church's architecture and worship should reflect that.
This is such like it's hard to explain how good this theology is. This is incredibly good theology, and I've seen like a lot of like RZ has done a really good job at this, and he's really growing in this way of like really communicating the truth of the gospel of like, yes, it's not about escaping and going to heaven. That's such a weird focus. Like, yes, we want to go to heaven. That's a great piece of the faith, but the faith that Jesus talked about, he talks about it's heaven colonizing, right? It's a phrase that's probably a word a lot of people won't like, but it's about heaven coming to earth and being here through the Church of Jesus Christ. Like that is the correct kingdom theology. Yeah, very, very good stuff.
So modern churches might be functional, but you wouldn't exactly call them colonies of heaven like you would with traditional churches, even small, humble ones. Now, when we talk about beautiful...
Now, some churches can't afford it, so you like do the best you can, but with very limited funds, you can make a building that doesn't look like, that doesn't look like a Foot Locker. You can make a building that doesn't look like an Outback Steakhouse, right? Like that's my problem is that like for the same amount of money, it doesn't take a lot to just like put a steeple up there so people know it's a church, right? Like the church I worked at a long time ago, they're like a church plant from 1999, and they built like a pretty modern building, but they put a steeple on it with a Celtic cross. It looks like a church because churches should look like churches.
churches, some might say beauty is in the eye of the beholder and therefore subjective, but this is actually modernist philosophy. Traditional Christian philosophy believes that goodness, truth, and beauty are transcendentals, meaning they're objective, they're connected to each other, and they're rooted in God's nature.
Yeah, like for instance, you look at like even a piece of art from another part of the world, like a mandala, right, in Buddhism, right? Like, I don't think Buddhism has anything close to the fullness of God, but it is objectively true that a mandala is beautiful. Like very few people look at that and they go, I'm not impressed, right? Like it's incredibly impressive. Like those monks like shave the little like things to make the color for like weeks and months, and then they immediately when they're done, they're so beautiful, and then they dump them into the river to show like that not everything is permanent or whatever it is. But like you look at those things, or you look at art, or you look at something and you say that is objectively beautiful, and like most people across cultures can recognize beauty in the same things.
Nature. Modern philosophy denies God, so it thinks all three of these things are subjective. Modern philosophy...
I do think there are some objective truths. I think there's some subjective ones too. I think that beauty is often objective, but has some subjectiveness to it. And goodness, that's hard. But yeah, I would say that like I'm generally in agreement with the point here that there is objectiveness in all of these things across cultures, right? Like across cultures, religions, faith, all people look at a sunset and say, wow, that's beautiful, and are inspired by it. And that's because God made that and it's beautiful. And humans, because they're made in the image of God, can recognize objective beauty.
Believes in subjective truth and is skeptical of religious claims. Modern philosophy believes in subjective morals and wants to break down traditional morality, and modern philosophy believes in subjective beauty, and that's what's behind modern art. We're
going to agree on the morals piece. See, my problem is when we like talk about LGBT stuff, it's always like a picture of like something like this, right? It's never, it's always something that seems very like out there, and like it's the part of the LGBT movement that like promotes like maybe polyamory, or it promotes like casual sex. And like if you remove that stuff and just take on monogamous same-sex unions, right, as they are, that's a totally different thing. And that's what I don't like, is that sometimes we overemphasize these other parts of the movement. So obviously we're gonna disagree there. But anyway, I'm gonna keep going.
Christians
I agree on art, though. I don't get modern art. It's not for me.
do a good job insisting that truth and goodness are objective, but still sometimes believe the modernist idea that beauty is subjective. It's partly because beauty can be hard to measure, especially when you're comparing different things, but can anybody honestly say that this is no more objectively beautiful than this?
Right. Like, that's the point he needs to really be focusing on. It is objectively, like, that is
honestly say that
that's objectively more beautiful than the other thing. I'm sorry. Who are you if you don't think that's true?
Is no more objectively beautiful than this. It's also not just pretty for the sake of prettiness, there's theological meaning behind
Right.
it. In Gothic architecture, everything, including the windows, is pointing upward so as to draw the eyes up towards heaven. Stained glass isn't just a pretty light source, although it is that. It's meant to mirror the gemstones in the holy city that
Right.
Revelation talks about. Stained glass traditionally has biblical imagery to help people learn things.
I'm inspired by the colored glass in our sanctuary every week.
Even in Presbyterian churches that don't want to depict Jesus himself. But even if we can make arguments for beautiful churches, we have to look at what the Bible says. Does the Bible actually command us to make beautiful church buildings? Many people don't think so. So let's look at both sides of the debate. So every time God tells people to make a worship space in Scripture, God tells them to make it beautiful.
That's true.
Full of splendor, made with skilled craftsmen. Solomon's temple was full of beauty and splendor, and it impressed all the nations of the world, and that's how God was glorified. But, some might say, God doesn't care about outward beauty, God looks at the heart. But just because God looks at the heart doesn't mean God doesn't also care about physical beauty. Even when the Israelites were wandering in the desert, God still told them to make a beautiful tabernacle.
It's true.
The Old Testament has tons of chapters just dedicated to the design of the tabernacle, and it goes into great detail, with jewels, skillful weaving, colors with theological meaning, skillful craftsmanship, and gold. Even though we don't have a literal tabernacle anymore, it shows that God cares about these details in worship.
I agree.
Although our worship forms change, God's dispositions don't change. One might argue that the temple veil has been torn in two, and now we don't need any more sacred places because God's presence can be accessed anywhere. This is true, but it doesn't mean we should make the temple like the rest of the world, it means we should make the rest of the world like the temple. That's why Christian universities traditionally looked like cathedrals.
Yeah.
Some people say it's a money issue, but this isn't really true, because many modern megachurches are very wealthy, but they don't build beautiful buildings because that's just not a priority for them. Whereas many old rural chapels were built by dirt-poor settlers who built it with their own hands.
This is true. This is why that argument falls apart. It's like, yeah, look at Joel Osteen's church. Very wealthy, not beautiful building. And then, yeah, a bunch of dirt-poor pioneers built that thing, right?
Whereas many old rural chapels were built by dirt-poor settlers who built it with their own hands. It's not like they were...
My church was constructed by the parishioners themselves.
Super wealthy, they just gave everything they had to the church because they cared about it. So why did people stop caring? The answer isn't money, it's bad theology.
Yeah.
Gnosticism is the ancient heresy that the physical is bad and we have to escape to the good spiritual world. Gnosticism was very influential on the Anabaptists in the 1500s, who rejected all traditional forms of church and said that you can just access God directly using the Bible and your personal feelings.
Right, which we would reject as Protestants. We say, yes, you can access God in prayer and for the forgiveness of sins, but you have to have the church. It's not just a personal experience that you have and you don't need the church. That is just terrible theology. Due to their Gnostic influence, they didn't care about the church as a physical institution, just as a spiritual community. Right. The Catholics and Protestants during the Reformation, despite not liking each other, both agreed that the Anabaptists were insane and the Anabaptists were isolated from European society. That's true, yeah. Protestants and Catholics both agree, like, yeah, the Anabaptists have gone too far. This is not what church is. But then guess what? The Anabaptists founded America, basically. So that's what he's probably going to go into next. But in America, the ghost of Anabaptist ideas was allowed to flourish and become very influential. The Great Awakenings in America were a move away from institutional churches. And American individualism was a good breeding ground for Anabaptist ideas to spread. So most modern American churches that are not part of a traditional denomination are fundamentally Anabaptist in their theology, even if they don't label themselves that. This is a great historical trace back to why is the church in America so off in the weeds about like nationalism and all this stuff, and it's because it was founded on what from the beginning was a bad problematic theology. And your mainline Protestant churches, which are smaller now, don't have that problem because they did not have that ideology. And so it's really important to understand, if you're coming out of one of these traditions, it's like, oh, I'm coming out of a tradition that from the beginning was considered by the entire church, both Protestant and Catholic at the time, to be incorrect. And no, faith is not all about just an individual experience, and this personal relationship. It's a personal relationship that is to be experienced in the community of the church. And if you're not in communion with the church, then you can't have the fullness of faith. It's impossible.
That's why it's all about a personal relationship in those churches, and the only purpose of church is gathering to have a personal relationship with Jesus together.
That's really good stuff.
As traditional mainline churches declined due to corruption and liberalism, and
I don't think liberalism, corruption maybe, but I wouldn't say liberalism made the church decline. I think changing cultural trends definitely did.
conservative offshoots utterly failed to replace them, non-denominational
I actually think too the churches declined because we failed to engage the world in the same way that we did in the 18 and 1900s.
liberalism, and conservative offshoots utterly failed to replace them.
They have, yeah.
Non-denominational churches have risen to fill the void, making their style of church very common. But it doesn't have to be this way. Linked in the description.
So I think he's going to do his Operation Reconquista thing here, and we've done that before. So I am going to. This is a really good video. Really good job, RZ, on this. I almost agree pretty much with the entire thing. Almost. There was a couple of caveats I had that obviously where I was differing on, but yeah, this is a big problem. Beauty is a lot of beauty is objective, and it was not only a good commentary on like why churches are ugly now, but like what is the historical trace back that's causing a lot of the problems in American evangelicalism today. So I thought that was very helpful. So make sure you go like and subscribe to Redeem Zoomer. Make sure you like and subscribe to my channel too if you like the commentary today. And until next time, I'm Reverend Matt, and I'm the Connectionalist, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye.